Hello, thank you for stopping by the channel. This is Dynamite Cop for the Sega Dreamcast, published by Sega back in 1999. It's basically a sequel to the Sega Die Hard arcade game. Dynamite Cop is going to play and feel pretty much the same, for the most part, just it's with a different setting. There's also a follow-up called Asian Dynamite, which is a game that I never heard of before I started writing this review. I'm not sure if that one ever made it to the US. Dynamite Cop is a Dreamcast arcade port that I think is probably fairly direct from the cabinet. You're going to see these little button press scenes between most of the stages, and when that happens they display the arcade joystick on the screen as opposed to a gamepad image or an arrow. So I'm pretty sure it's a fairly direct import. We have a 3D beat-em-up game that's designed, for the arcade at least, to eat your quarters. Continues are free on the Dreamcast, of course, so there's no problem there. In this game, I think the premise is simple, and it's also crazy enough. There's a group of pirates that hijack a cruise liner, and the president's daughter happens to be on board. Okay, you go on board to save her. You have 3 different missions that you can choose from the start, but basically this is just how you begin the whole mission, either by parachute, speedboat, or maybe underwater. And it does affect the progression of rooms that you fight through as you move through the ship. They're not all going to be completely different, but they do offer you some variety, which is nice. You get to choose from 3 characters to play, each with a slightly different moveset. 2 male and 1 female. The gameplay overall is fairly simple. You're going to enter some sort of a room, some guys are going to show up, and you beat the crap out of them. Then the game is going to guide you to another room for you to do the same thing again. Sometimes there's this little mini-game in between the rooms, and it's usually just a single button press or a joystick direction. If you fail to trigger whatever the press is, you're just going to have an additional encounter. I think these moments are simple enough, and they work well. It helps the game a little bit, I think, just to string you from room to room, so it works. You get to beat people up here with a pretty decent combination of punches, kicks, and there's a jump button thrown in there as well. The button presses actually feel pretty responsive, and maybe a little more responsive than I would have expected. When you're putting the hurt on someone, it feels pretty good. I think one of the big things with Dynamite Cop is that you can also pick up items, and you can use those items as weapons. And there are actually a lot of these items, and there's plenty of variety. Your attacks are going to also look different depending on what you're using, which is nice. One room that stood out to me, there were these, what appeared to be anyway, pikes in the ground with heads on them. Turns out, the second time I got to it and I was looking at this room, they weren't pikes with heads, they were mannequin heads, and it was like a salon that you were in. Pretty interesting, but still, you can knock the stand over, you can pick it up, and you can beat somebody with it, swinging it like a club. It's pretty neat. You can also grab different guns along the way, and you can shoot until you run out of ammo at least. And sometimes you can even get bigger weapons like a rocket launcher, and that can set off a mushroom cloud, which is pretty fun. This one handles really well, I think, and you can move and attack in 8 different directions, and I know this isn't that big of a deal by today's standards, but back in the late 90s, these type of graphics, running this smooth, and fighting in multiple directions, multiple enemies, this is what got you dropping quarters into cabinets. I think the avatars are sufficiently tough, and they look acceptable for the time they were created. Interesting enough, as you start getting beat up in this game, your clothes start to tear and fall off, as you get more hurt. I think this is a reasonable way to show how much damage you've been taking. It's pretty good. And of course, if you pick up something to heal, you will get clothing back. We have plenty of enemies to take care of in this game, which is great. The design on the enemies is what you'd expect from the era, and often they're ridiculous looking. The pirate boss actually kinda looks like a pirate. In one level I fought a guy with a turtle shell on his back, and in another a bunch of guys dressed like lobsters. You also get to beat up an octopus at one point, which is pretty fun. It isn't that hard to get through a mission on the credits that they give you. I mean, you can beat it in a sitting in maybe 30 minutes. It's fun, it's just not a gigantic challenge to get through once. I think you get 9 or 10 continues. Whatever you get, it's plenty to complete a mission, that's for sure. If you want to get through all 3 missions at once in the same credits, I guess that's a bit more of a challenge. When you do beat a mission the first time through anyway, you unlock a game called Tranquilizer Gun, which is this old Sega arcade game that, honestly, I never heard of. In this one, you drive a little truck around a hedge maze, and you get out and shoot and tranquilize these animals. If you shoot enough and you knock an animal out, you can drag it back to your truck, and then you get some points and you drive on to the next one. I don't know why they would choose to include this specific game with Dynamite Cop. I really have no idea. I can't find any gameplay or story connection here. It just feels weird. And the game Tranquilizer Gun is really basic in comparison. Can't explain it. You can also unlock Showdown Mode, which is if you get to beat all the 3 missions from the main game, I guess. If you get to this mission, actually it offers more options for the expert player. Basically allows you to make the game more difficult. You can set it to less power-ups, you can have level timers, or less health. I haven't unlocked this mode yet, but I've been trying. There's also a versus mode, if you want to beat down a friend. And there's a survival mode, which is just 1 player. And it's you taking on hordes of enemies within a time limit, trying to beat your best score. Interesting to have this variety. I don't know if it's necessary, but I'll take it. This is a pretty good one overall, I think. It's really fun to mash these buttons, and I think it's really worth your time if you're into the Dreamcast. It's a good one, it's fun, and although it's kinda short, it is definitely enjoyable, and I'm having a lot of fun playing it. Well, that's all I have for Dynamite Cop for the Sega Dreamcast. Thanks for stopping by to take a look, and hope to catch you on another video.